Here's Guy Wehman, Ben Brunson, and Frank Vernuccio inside the news.
Welcome back to our final segment of the program, Inside the News. This is where we kind of put a bow on the program here. We got Frank Vernuccio top left, Ben Brunson in the middle, and we had to put a wrap on this thing. But you know something, Frank, when they say follow the money, and these cities have spent like a drunken sailor. They want the American people like us and the rest of the American people under this fourth or fifth stimulus package, whatever it is, to bail them all out. And that's why it's not $2 trillion, it's a $3 trillion, because this is a massive bailout that we have to do because these cities can't manage their own funds. Frank, you have about a minute.
You know, there's supposed to be two types of governments: low-tax governments that provide low services and high-tax states that provide high amounts of services. Unfortunately, in the progressive portions of America, we have the worst of both worlds. High-tax states that provide lousy services. The money, just as in New York, seems to just vanish into the hinterlands. In New York City, for example, the mayor's wife somehow lost $800 million. That's not a unique story. You can go from one end of the country to the other, and you'll see similar stories. And that's why these local progressive governments are so desperate for a federal bailout.
Ben, your final word on this, then we'll do hot buttons.
Well, Frank said it well, and a lot of the spending becomes patronage spending, where you are rewarding your voter group, people who turn around and become very loyal Democratic voters, and that smacks to me of being unconstitutional and immoral. However, it is the reality that exists in a lot of these cities and states.
You know, this is almost like taxation without representation, because they just want to tax America, but the people that are in there, they might have been voted in by the people, but I don't know, they kind of do what they want. Okay, Frank, your hot button topic.
You know, across kitchen tables and water coolers in offices, people are asking in very quiet voices, are we heading for a new civil war? I think the answer is no, we're not heading for a new civil war. We are already in one. If you look at the actions in places like Portland, where the mayor has decided to side with Antifa rebels, and I use that term advisedly, when you look at other cities where autonomous zones have been set up, if you look at attacks on federal courthouses, when you look at the mayor of New York City who openly sides with Antifa against his own citizens and against the police force, there is a civil war going on in America right now. Whether justice wins, whether the Constitution wins, depends heavily on what happens in November.
You know, I think that was well said. And Frank, you know, when you said, are we going to be in one? We are in one. And it's not like it was back in the 1860s where it was all guns and rifles and things like that. But it's on a whole different front, although Antifa's using guns.
Well said. And in fact, that civil war does exist now. And I think Americans, because of the bias of the media that largely sides with Antifa and Black Lives Matter, refuses to admit the extent to which the country has been torn apart, certainly since the start of the Obama administration.
If they really wanted to get action, instead of throwing tea in the Boston Harbor, they should throw Starbucks coffee, and people would be jumping like crazy saying, I want my lattes and my mochas, right, Ben?
Yes, but I'm going to talk about something different.
Okay, go.
So, two big studies were released a couple of weeks ago. One received a little bit of press before it was buried. One received no press. One was the CDC study that basically said only 6% of the deaths attributed to COVID so far are actually purely a result of COVID infection. Most are comorbidities or older people. Another huge study came out of Stanford and UCLA, two well-known far-right organizations, and I say that in jest, two highly respected California universities, where they looked at the odds of someone between 50 and 64 getting and dying from COVID, and they put the odds at ridiculously low levels. They put the odds of dying from COVID in that age group at 1 in 19 million. And they went on to state that across this country, the fear and the overestimation of the ability to succumb to COVID has been greatly overstated, greatly overplayed among everyone's minds and the press. And that the reality is you're not very likely, you're far more likely to die in an auto accident, for instance. So these are the realities that show that the absolute folly of the lockdown strategy that the West has followed.
Mm-hmm. And the left keeps going to the University of Washington and that study group up there, and that's a Bill Gates thing, and that's why it's so far left that they propagated that. And Ben, you were spot on.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's a lot of great research, but it's just getting ignored.
All right. Frank, good show today. Thank you.
Great being with you both.
Ben?
Thank you, gentlemen. Always a great pleasure.
And we're going to catch you again next week for another edition of Inside the News.
You're listening to Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio, Inside the News.